meaning? What are they saying to us now? What's the purpose for us? Not the application, but how do we interpret this? What we find in both murder and adultery is that Jesus has come to tell everyone, including the Pharisees and the scribes, that it's not okay to just refrain from the act of murder or adultery. It's not okay to just to not do it. Both the act and the harbouring of it in our hearts, we're in danger of judgment. What Jesus wants us to see is that the law is not for our external performance to look good. That's not the purpose of the law. For if it was, then there wouldn't be any need for Jesus. Very basic point. If we could abide by the law, Jesus wouldn't need to have come. But then that would suggest that we are able to fulfill every single law of the Old Testament. And as I said last week, it's entirely not possible to do that. Its purpose, though, is to reveal the source of where these things come from the heart and the imagination. It's designed to reveal where the seed of these things are planted. In this quote here from Morgan, he says, the supervision of the kingdom does not begin by arresting a criminal with blood-red hands. It arrests the man in whom the murder spirit is just born. And these are shocking statements to make, because once Jesus said to people, if you think about it, you are under equal judgment as if you've done them. That's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to accept that we're under the same judgment as the act itself. But we need to be clear. Jesus is not saying that anger is as bad as murder, or that lust in the heart is as bad as actual adultery. Jesus emphasizes that the law condemns both, without saying that the law says that they are the same thing. Isn't this strange? But isn't he just saying, well, no, he's not. He's not saying they're the same thing. Jesus said to his followers that understood that God's morality addressed not only the end, but also the beginning of murder and adultery. What he's looking at is, where is the seed of murder? Where is the seed of adultery? Because it's not actually, although it is about the judgment, what Jesus is actually, I believe, in looking at the text, trying to tell us, or us to try and understand, is that if he exposes that it is actually in our heart, which it is, I can do something about it, can't I? Actually, before the act happens, and Jesus says, if it's in your heart, you need to do something about it now, not wait until it happens. What Jesus has done is done this amazing favour for us, amazing gift, and said, what that will lead to, if you think that harbouring it is okay, but as long as you don't do the act is fine, is that you will do the act anyway. At some point, you will do some form of that act. Now, I'm not saying that one of you will murder somebody. I'm not saying that one of you will commit adultery. But if it's there, there's Jesus saying, well, hang on, look at the heart. Is there something there? Because by the time it happens, it's too late. Look into the heart. Is there a sense of revenge, of adultery? In regard to murder, it starts with something that broods. That's why Jesus talks about anger. That's where it begins. It wants to seek revenge for something. It wants to get even. I have to say, in reading this, I've heard much about the murder in regards to the biblical definition, or what people say it is. Even more recently, it's been used as a political tool to fight causes such as abortion rights. Even some of the most well-read and most respected teachers and theologians say that there are exceptions to something being called murder. No matter how much on the spectrum, or the conservative spectrum, you are with the Bible, and how much of a reformist you are, we will find a way to work our way around the rule. And so I think there's a problem with this. We are really good at justifying actions to ourselves, especially seemingly when it comes to war. Yet history, aside from the fact that most wars are not religious in reason or in nature, despite what people say, most wars are not for religious reasons, actually they're for just greed and for money and for taking over countries, power. History shows us that we will go to such an extent to justify ourselves and our actions that we even make up words for it. What could be more obvious about why anyone goes to war against another than a harbouring of anger in the heart? It's an act of revenge. And we can think of wars even in more recent times where that's happened, where there's a sense of revenge. We must get you back for killing, for doing this. We need to be careful we don't start changing words over. Murder, well, it's not murder, it's killing. And killing's okay. War apparently is killing, it's not murder. How is that? Well, I read that apparently that killing is in a justified war. You think, well, hold on a minute. Let me think about this. The people that are acting to go to war are broken, sinful people who are struggling to deal with their sin and so want power and so go to war. I'm finding it hard here to suddenly ignore the sin in people and this anger and this want for power, that suddenly war is justified. Either it's murder or it's not. Either it's anger or it's not. Either it's revenge or it's not. Am I saying that we shouldn't defend ourselves? Of course not. Of course not. But it is the principle that Jesus speaks into. And what it reveals is the state of our heart. What Jesus is speaking about is not trying to be perfect necessarily in thought life. He knows that's not possible. He knows that, by the way, just to give you some comfort. He knows you can't not think of these things. Last week, we talked about the fulfilling of the law. They're all connected. Jesus fulfilling the law means that he knows that I can't not think about it, that I can't not get angry. He knows I can get angry. He knows. He knows as we go through each of these laws, these 5 sections, these 5 verses, as it were, he knows that we're susceptible to these things. So actually he's pointing to a bigger thing, maybe salvation, maybe redemption, maybe Jesus saving us from the penalty of the law. When we hold on to our anger against another, we sin. And we give place to the devil. Ephesians 4:26-27. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold. Here, this is one of those, well, hold on a minute. In your anger, do not sin. So I can be angry and not sin. It's actually okay to be angry about some things. It's actually okay. But uncontrolled anger, anger that is let loose, will lead to doing wrong. Having anger doesn't give license to sin. So this is what this verse means. In your anger, do not sin. God knows we get angry. There are things we get angry about. Just don't let that unleash itself onto everybody. Don't let that go onto everyone and just completely, lay a path of destruction around people. Keep it in check. Instead, we've got to deal with our anger rather than live in our anger. Proverbs 25, verse 28 says, like a city whose walls are broken, through is a person who lacks self-control. 2 Peter 1, 5-7, for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, to goodness, knowledge, and to knowledge, self-control, and to self-control, perseverance, to perseverance, godliness, godliness, mutual affection, and to mutual affection, love. Proverbs 16, verse 32, better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. Tough verses. It's okay to be angry at things. It's okay to feel like there's a lack of justice in the world. It's okay to feel that. It's not okay to act it out. My notes have completely changed. Give me a minute. Okay, we're back. It's fine. I don't know what that was. My notes went straight to the top again. Maybe God's saying, hey, start all over again. You're going, oh, please don't start all over again. Anyway, what are we called to do? We're called to discern over our anger. What is the reason for my anger against this person? And here is a myth buster. There's no such thing as any person acting on anger and calling it righteous. No matter how much you think it's righteous, God wouldn't stand for that. You still do not have, I do not have enough righteousness to be righteous. James 1, verses 19-21 says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. I suppose the same would go for adultery. Self-control is clearly the key to prevent our downfall. Some of you, as I know also, know of situations in churches not far from here where leaders have succumbed to the act of adultery. And that's incredibly sad. But it does remind the rest of us to be on alert. It reminds us that things can escalate very, very quickly. Going back to the point about the seed, if it's in our heart, at some point, it will act out. It will come to pass. It can happen so quickly in action, but it can harbour in the heart for such a long time. The law is there to show us that it does. Jesus is there to say, you can be saved from it. The consequences of the law you do not have to suffer. You will be saved if you believe in Jesus and trust in him. And so no longer do you live to that law, but you live to the law of Jesus Christ, which is freedom in him. But it doesn't make the law go away. The law is our mirror. It holds up to us and says, I'm not able to fulfill this. It reminds us that we need Jesus constantly. It reminds us that we're not able to meet its requirements. Jesus says the origin of this desire is found in the eyes. As Jesus states when he says, whoever looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. We find that Job speaks of this too. Job 31 verse 1, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. Even earlier, even back then, see, they had a clue. The Pharisees had a clue. It was more than just the act. Even Job recognizes it's more than that. It's actually what that will do if you allow it to run away. If we allow what we see to run away with us in our head. The recognition of adultery in the heart is not saying, you have to keep conditioning this, it's not saying it's the same as the act of adultery itself. The point here is to recognize when adultery is in the heart and what it looks like before the act itself is committed. 2 Corinthians 10 verse 3 to 7 says, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments, every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ, and we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. You are judging by appearances. If anyone is confident that they belong to Christ, they should consider again that we belong to Christ just as much as they do." Adultery is a form of coveting. Again, we're stepping back now and we're saying, well, what's adultery? Well, it's part of coveting something. I want something I don't have. It's craving something. So it's not that it's wrong to not refrain from adultery, but it can't just be that. It can't just be not doing it. We need to recognize when it comes to our minds. Nothing wrong with it coming into our minds because we're sinful, broken people. What do we do with that thought, though? That's the question. This is what Jesus is laying down right in front of them. What do you do with that? It will come into your minds, but what are you going to do with it? Are you going to encourage it? Are you going to grow it? Are you going to keep adding to it? We have powerful imaginations as human beings, yet without this control, it can begin this wake of destruction that will ultimately play itself out. Matthew 15 verse 18 says, "But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them." I've only put 18 up there. Actually, it goes on to say, 19, "For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery," that's what we're looking at, "sexual immorality, theft, I can't say it now, it's gone, thieving, false witness, and slander." We know what we think about, and we know what we allow our heart to rest on based on our choice. We choose to follow up. We choose to explore. We choose to carry on in the thought. And so we can struggle in passing thoughts, in passing feelings, but we do have a final say. We have the last word on what we do with those thoughts, how we treat them, what we do with them. Carson here quotes as, "Imagination is a God-given gift, but if it is fed dirt by the eye, it will be dirty. All sin, not least the sexual sin, begins with imagination. Therefore, what feeds the imagination is of maximum importance in the pursuit of kingdom's righteousness." What we feed our minds and our heart has an incredible impact on our pursuit of the kingdom. There's no other way around this other than to feed ourselves with a healthy diet. In this case, it's the Word of God. It is the only thing we don't have to have in moderation and be better because of it. You might have gone to the doctors and the doctor says to you, well, you need to stop, you need to lower your salt intake. Have it in moderation. Slow down those takeaways, have it in moderation. The Bible has no moderation about it. Take as much as you want, as many times as you like, and it will still be even better for you. This is how we cut off that that which might send our whole body to hell. Speak the word into it. Don't do as a certain early Christian did and literally cut things off. Apparently, an early Christian, and I can't remember his name, I haven't written it down, he cut off certain parts of his body and took Jesus' command literally and did that. But you can cut off as many limbs as you like. Our sin comes from the heart and from the mind. You can't stop that unless you're dead. And this is what Jesus is ultimately addressing. Jesus wants us to know that we must be willing to sacrifice to be obedient. If part of our life is in sin, then it must be sacrificed so we are not wholly condemned. And it has to be more than just a vague want. I just wish I didn't do that. It has to have obedience in mind. I want to be obedient to the Lord, and I want to not do that. I want to honor him in my thoughts as well as my actions.